Good evening and welcome back to Fireside Fairytales 2024, our first stream of the year. And if you've never been here before, well, what we're going to do tonight, and by the way, chat, let me know if I'm too quiet or if the audio is off or anything like that, but what we're going to do tonight is we're going to read some old classic folklore, probably stuff you haven't heard before, some of which I know you haven't heard before, some of which you might have, especially if you've watched the channel. But all about New Year's in some ways or another. And if you are a person who is new here and you're not watching this live, then check out down in the description below. There will be timestamps for all the stories down there. And you are welcome, as you see fit, to jump ahead to wherever you are most interested. But if you are here live, check out the live chat, because there's already some folks in the live chat. I see we have GS back. Hello, GS. It's lovely to see you again. Jumstore says, Happy New Year, everyone. Well, Happy New Year to you, Jumstore. We're going to be talking about what you guys can do for your New Year's. Zombie Wolf says, how have you guys been? I haven't seen y'all since last year. It's an old joke, but it's a good one. Checks out. That's not how that meme goes. But by the way, if you have more New Year's jokes, put them in the chat. I'm curious to see them. Also, something I like, I realize I'm getting a little old for this, is I'd love to hear what you guys, if you do celebrate Christmas or some sort of gift-giving occasion over those holidays, let me know what you got, or at least some of the things that you really were excited to get. As for me, Jumpstore says, hope you had a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Rory. I had as good a one as I could. Anyhow, we're going to talk about New Year's tonight in folklore. And before I do that, there is one thing I want to do. First off, I want to wish my lovely and perfect sister a very happy birthday, for it is her birthday today. She's a little bit older than me. I won't divulge exactly how, but she has a January birthday, which is a kind of curse. And so I think she deserves some love, even though you folks in the chat don't really know her. So say happy birthday to my sister. Happy birthday, sister. The next thing I'm going to talk about is New Year's in folklore and the weird sort of status it has, before I go into some tales about what you can do around New Year's to get rich. And then I'm actually going to tell you a story. The main part of this storytelling part is actually going to be a kind of founder's myth for Iceland that takes place around New Year's. You'll see what I mean. It's not a true founder's myth, but it's a really unusual story. So first off, if you don't care about any of my framing on this and you just want to get to the stories, again, if you are watching this not live, check down in the description below. There will be timestamps you can skip ahead. I'm going to talk for maybe 4 to 6 minutes here. So, New Year's in folklore is a peculiar thing. For one, exactly when a new year starts varies over time and across cultures, even to this day. For two, focusing in on Northern and Western European lore for this point, it is often connected invariably to the solstice and or Christmas for a bunch of reasons I'll mention in a minute. So, like those other days of significance, keep topping out and I don't know why. See if I can. Hopefully that helps a bit. Sorry. Anyways, like those other days of significance, it becomes the day to do weird things. Or not to do certain banal things, like leave your doors open, lest you will get weird results. So those results can be things that we've talked about in other streams and stuff. Money, love, curses, special weapons and swords, and a whole wad of seemingly unrelated things, including death. I actually made an entire video, though, specifically on how sticks and various things can become weapons if used on Christmas or New Year's or anywhere in those solstice days. And that was last year, 12 months ago. And I do recommend it, obviously. But at least part of the reason these days become associated to each other as sort of one form of holiday, or things where the same thing will happen from day to day, or they all kind of carry magic, is because they were connected by Yule, which is the 12 days of feasting that primarily Nordic culture, though not exclusively, Nordic and Germanic rather, associates to the solstice, which is to say the sort of midwinter. Depending on your tradition, many things get pinned to those 12 days where we place Christmas and New Year's. So sometimes, as I've covered in previous streams, it's the Wild Hunt rides that day, and that could be as Thor or Odin with the Valkyries if you're going way back, or that could be the more modern things like Frau Gauden, who and her daughter hounds riding as the Wild Hunt. Now the latter, Frau Gauden, on that point, is a good example of the sort of weird things that happen in the holidays, because if you leave your doors open during those 12 days, Frau will give, or can give you, a hound who will howl, and you'll be cursed to care for it for 1 year, and if you bring it harm, I'll let you go and watch the video if you want to find out what happens if you harm it. Sorry, I thought I smelled something toasty. Well, hopefully that's nothing. It might be somebody cooking upstairs. Anyways, the also, exactly when these days occur initially is also debatable, so that kind of makes it mixed up why some things are like New Year's Day or Christmas Day or whatever. And we are dealing with many calendars, both from region to region and from time to time. You know, as you move through time, the calendars change. With that in mind, exactly when and where this stuff occurs is malleable. So, you know, saying that Christmas is magic or the solstice is magic or New Year's is magic, it kind of becomes a broad brush that it all gets painted with. And the reason I'm framing this is because I've never really done a New Year's episode, because usually anything that happens on New Year's is often also associated to Christmas. It is a time of strange and magical things occurring. The other one that happens that's completely unrelated to anything wintry is St. John's Day has a bunch of things that happen on it. Anyways, with all of that in mind, knowing how folklore deals with New Year's and the malleability of what New Year's even means, I'm going to tell you of 3 ways, according to German and Icelandic folklore, that you can supposedly get rich on one of these days of significance, which includes New Year's. 2 of which I have actually read before, one of which I'm going to reread, one I'll just make reference to because I've read it too recently. And then I'm going to read you one of the most unusual New Year's tales I've ever heard, and that serves as a kind of founding myth of Iceland as I perceive it. You can make your own judgment on this. Oh, Tammy's here. Oh, Tammy's not here. Tammy says, I have pneumonia, so I will see you all on Thursday. Well, you feel better, Tammy. I was going to ask you about how your daughter's doing, but you tell me on Thursday. I hope you feel better. And we're talking about siblings, which I won't get roped into right now, but I'm glad we all love our siblings. Okay. So on to that. We're going to do 2 short stories with a reference to a third one talking about the ways that New Year's gets dealt with in folklore. And then we're going to read a longer tale that I loved. I loved it. I know that it's probably not going to be as popular as the first little ones. The weirder ones are always more popular, but I think it is super fun and interesting. So that's what we're doing tonight. Unless my laptop gives up. I do need to put this caveat. If at some point the screen just goes blank and the stream ends, the laptop died. And I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do about it. So our first story tonight is called the Heckethaler, or the Swinemünde. And it is about a cursed coin. It comes to us from Sunken Castle's Evil Poodles, which are translations by the contemporary Jürgen Hubert, who you can support on their Patreon, and should. You get a whole bunch of stories like this, even just supporting once, and you get more every month. Let's set a little bit of a mood. A few years ago, a man lived in Swinemünde, who had a Heckethaler. He had obtained it in the following manner. Heckethaler is a coin. He went to the church door during New Year's night, so you folks will have to plan for the next New Year's. He caught a black tomcat. Worry not, though, the cat comes to no harm in this tale, or I would have warned you. And importantly, this black tomcat did not have a single white hair on its body, and put it into a bag. And then he took this bag on his back and walked backwards, not forwards, around the church, starting from the church door. And once he had returned, he knocked at the door 3 times. Then a man stepped outside. And he asked if he would sell the tomcat in the bag on the man's back. Yes. For how much? For 1 thaler. This is too much. I am willing to give 8 groschen. Not for that amount. And then the man with the cat on his back in a bag walked around the church backwards again, a second time, just as he had before, and again he knocked 1, 2, 3 times at the door, and the same man stepped out. Maybe looking a little perturbed, the stories are mixed. He repeated his demand, but this time had the sense to offer 16 groschen. But again, the man with the cat in the bag on his back said, "Not for that amount." And now he went around the church backwards for the 3rd time, and he knocked again 3 times. And the other man came out once more, and he demanded and now received his thaler. Then he threw the bag with the tomcat on the ground and ran back home with the money as quick as he was able. And since then, he could spend that thaler as often as he wanted. And as soon as the last groschen was gone, well, the entire thaler was in his pocket again. That is our first tale of how to get rich on New Year's according to German folklore. But it's not the only advice that German folklore has for us to this end. The next one is actually a tale I've read before, but it's very short, and it's been many months since I've read it. It's about a dragon. So if you don't have access to a cat with no white hairs, like I have a black cat, but he has white hairs, and you're not willing to sell it on New Year's night for a thala at the church after walking around backwards with it 3 times, all simple investment advice, to be honest. Then instead, you could try, this is a little more luck-based though, you could try to see Glowtail. I'm going to have a drink of water and then we will talk about that one. If this ever loads. Here's hoping it hasn't crashed. There we go. Our next tale about getting rich according to Germanic traditions on New Year's comes to us again from Sunken Castle's Evil Poodles, a collection of translations by the contemporary Jürgen Hubert, who you can support at his Patreon in the pinned comment below if it is not live anymore. And it is called Of Glowtail. During New Year's Eve, the fiery dragon known as Glowtail roams through the air. It carries all sorts of things with it: money, meat, and rubbish as well. Whoever sees the dragon pass overhead and then shouts, "Half part!" will indeed get half of whatever the dragon carries. Many a rich man owes his money only to the dragon, which throws the treasure then down his chimney. And a farmer woman who lived in a village between Brunswick and Lera once quickly became well off and soon was rich. This had seemed suspicious to her farmhand for quite some time, and thus decided to pay closer attention. And indeed, during one midnight hour, he saw Glowtail, who raced down the chimney and visited the woman. He even witnessed how the dragon sang and jumped around with the woman. Which makes me wonder how they're conceptualizing dragons here, because dragons as a concept are very, very culturally broad. Certainly not the way we would think of a dragon if it's slipping down a chimney. And the third tale, which I will not repeat because it was in our last episode, before we went on break there, our Icelandic volcano episode, is called The Crossways, which comes to us from, where our next story comes from, Icelandic folklore. And the gist of it is, it says if you live in Iceland on either Christmas night, which is why I read it then, or New Year's night, if you go to the crossroads and you sit there, elves will come along and try to get you to speak or move or acknowledge them. They'll take on images of your loved ones and plead for help. They'll bring you gold and jewels and so on to try and get your attention. But if you keep focused for the entire night, not leaving, not moving, not addressing them, not looking at them, not doing anything, when the sun rises, they have to disappear, and whatever they've brought you to bribe, you get to keep. So that is our third way to get rich at Christmas. New Year's rather. There are actually quite a few other ways. There are other things that you can supposedly do on New Year's. One story I almost read, but I didn't read because it was a little bit grim for this show specifically. I have considered doing another one where all the more adult stuff happens. Not that this is a kid's show, but some of them are kind of grim. Is that you could draw in a person you love on New Year's. But there's a whole lore around it, and the tale itself usually ends up with whoever did it getting murdered by their lover. So, those are the 3 ways to get rich at Christmas, if you just, or New Year's rather. But a lot of these actually apparently work at Christmas as well. But the actual tale that we're going to focus our time on tonight, now that we're through those ones, is also a tale of New Year's. But it is a very different type of tale. I see that the chat is having a therapeutic moment with each other by discussing siblings and the good and the bad. Remember, family is where you find it. So, the story that we're actually going to read, well, we read the other ones. The story that we are going to read is called The Wizards in the Westmann Islands, rather. And now, just a word on the Westmann Islands. They are south, maybe a little east of Iceland. They're basically connected to Iceland, but they are, you know, islands technically, so they're fully disconnected, but they're very close. And they're just a little patch of islands. They're not very big. You could probably walk across them in maybe a couple of hours at most. Maybe even less than that if you have a good stride. But they were, I imagine, somewhat mysterious to the folks who looked out from the shore at them, because I don't believe they were used too much in the past. But I don't know. I haven't been there. It'll be a long time till I get to go to Iceland, though I do plan to. And this one is about wizards, or sometimes they're called, translated as sorcerers, of indistinct origin, but everything about this makes this feel like a very old tale, and you'll see what I mean. I don't want to say too much, because this is one of the most unique tales I've ever read. It never does anything I expect, even as a person who reads this stuff well, I was going to say full time, but not even close, but reads this stuff regularly. It's not even so much that it's weird, it's just very of a different conception of the world than I'm used to. You'll see what I mean. This story is called The Wizards in the Westmann Isles, and it comes to us from Icelandic Legends, which is a very old and very classic collection of Icelandic folklore by Jon Arnarsson. And it functions as a kind of founding myth for Iceland. Not exactly, but it has that feel. During the time when that dread pest, Ecleft, the Black Death, in other words, disease, raged through Iceland, 18 sorcerers banded together and went out to the Westmann Isles in order to escape, as long as possible, the scourge of the Black Death. When after a while, by means of their magic arts, they discovered that the plague was abating its fury, they were curious to know how many people were left alive in the country. So, they agreed to send one of their company to land that he might find how matters stood and make his report to the others. And they chose this errand for this errand a man who was neither first nor last in the knowledge of their arts. And when they put him ashore, they told him that if he did not return to them by Christmas Day next, they would dispatch a sending to him who should kill him. Now, pausing here for a moment, it's not entirely clear what ascending means. It's obviously you're expected to know this, but the story, when it comes to matter, will describe it, and I'm going to let it pace its information out. So don't worry if you do not know what that means. It's a curse of sorts that will kill him. A cruciatus, if you want. Far and wide wandered the man in Iceland, north, south, and east, without finding a single living soul. All the dwellings stood wide open from floor to roof. Even on threshold and on hill lay the dead, out plucked by birds. At last he came to a house, and it was shut up. And through his wonder at this, half hoped that there still were some signs of human life. And so he knocked loudly at the door, which was instantly opened. There came out a young and beautiful damsel, who, half wild with joy to see again a living man, answered his salutation by falling on his neck and embracing him so, telling him at the same time with many tears that she had thought herself the only living creature in the whole land. She begged him to stay with her some time, which he consented to do, and so they went into the house and held a vast deal of talk together. She asked him whence he came and what was the object of his journey, and he told her all about the company of wizards, their desire to know how many people were left alive in the land, and their strict command to him to be back in the Westmann Isles before next Christmas Day. But she begged for his company as long as he could possibly afford it her, and he, pitying her loneliness, agreed to stay with her some time. The girl told him that within many and many a mile not one soul was left alive, for she had made a week's journey from home in all directions, hoping to find someone still living, but quite in vain. So the man abode there, and Christmas Day drew nearer and nearer, until at last he felt bound to tell the girl that he must leave her now, or suffer the punishment of death for his disobedience to the commands of the other sorcerers. But the girl would not hear of his going so soon, and coaxed him to stay yet a little longer, saying that surely his companions were not such unmerciful and heartless folks as to kill him for so slight a fault as staying with a poor, lonely woman. By these words she quite overcame his determination to leave her till Christmas Eve came round. Then said he truly must leave her, as he valued his life. And at first she tried to persuade him to stay with her by caresses and prayers and pleading and tears. But finding him deaf to them, she changed her tone and said, "Well, my good man, since you will go. Reach the Westmann Isles by Christmas Day if you can. I wish you luck in your journey. Somewhat more than common speed." Then the man suddenly bethought himself that more than common speed must indeed be his if he would make the journey in time, and so knowing that it was totally useless for him to start now for the Westmann Islands, he resolved to stay, choosing to await his death where he was with the pretty young lady. So he passed the night in a sad state of mind, but the maiden, on the contrary, was as lively could be, and asked him if he could now see what was going on among his companions, and he said, they had just rowed the sending ashore from the islands. And so she sat at the foot of the bed, which was near the door, and he lay behind her. And after a while he told her he felt a strange heaviness come over him, which he knew to be owing to the magic arts of the wizards. Having told her this, he fell into a deep sleep despite his best efforts. By and by, the girl, who still sat at the bed's foot, woke him and asked him if he knew now where the sending was, or his way. Within the bounds of the farm, and fell back again into a sleep so deep that, shake him as she would, she could not rouse him from it. And when she had sat there a little while longer, she saw it, a brownish vapor, seep and enter the house through the open door. It glided across the floor towards her, and then, standing still before her, took the figure of a man. "Well," said the girl, "what do you want here?" And the sending said to her, "I am sent hither by the wizards of the Westmann Islands to slay this man who has broken his word to them, as one who knows not what truth is. Move, therefore, from the bed, for while you sit there, I cannot reach him." "All in good time," replied she, "but first of all, you must do me some service." Well, the sending asked what service she would of him. "Make yourself, for instance," she answered, "as large as you can." This, he said, he would assuredly do, and willingly enough, and accordingly he made himself so large that he filled the house. "That'll do," said the girl. "Now, for instance, make yourself as small as you can." And so the sending shrunk down and down, not this big, but the size of a fly, all the way down from a monstrous giant. He became the smallest fly you ever did saw, smaller than a fruit fly. Said she, and stuck him forthwith into an empty marrow-bone, which she had in her pocket, and corked him in. Then, putting the bone back in her pocket, she woke the man. He started up, wondering that he was yet alive, and she asked him where was now the sending, as if she didn't know. I know not," said he, and she answered, "I thought your companions were no such great wizards as you made them out to be. Trouble yourself no more about them, and they will not slay you just yet. But let us spend Christmas Day in mirth and joy." And so they did. They spent Christmas Day in such revel as befitted the time, and a late escape from death, then laughed and sang till the rafters had not heard the like of it for many a long year. Surely more than that. Now, as the New Year's Day drew nigh, the man fell again into his old sadness, and he became so gloomy that the girl noticed his strange manner and asked him what ailed him now. He answered, "The wizards of the Westmann Islands are now preparing another sending, and when that shall come here, it will be no easy task for me to escape from it." "Oh," said the girl, "just wait till I've tried its strength, and then it will be time enough and afraid of it to be afraid of it. Meanwhile, don't trouble your head about either your friends on the island or their threats." Well, it was infectious, wasn't it? The maiden was so light-hearted, he thought that surely he would be but a coward to be dull and sad, and accordingly put on the brightest face he could upon the matter. And so it was, until on New Year's Eve he spoke to the girl and said, "Now the sending has been put ashore, and gifted as it was with all the wrath of the wizards, it comes apace." And she begged him to come with her, and led him across the country until they came to a place where the grass was high and the shrubs were thick. And in the midst of this the girl stooped down, and removing a low mound of earth and grass which stood at her feet, came to a large slab of stone, which she lifted, and by so doing disclosed a passage leading far below ground. They entered the passage, and after walking for a long time in darkness greater than that of the blackest night, they came to a cavern, which we have a picture of. And hopefully it doesn't crash my computer to do this, but I can turn it temporarily clockwise. And we can see a picture of them in the background. They're in a cave. There's two of them. There's an old man in a bed, which we'll find out about in a minute. And then there's a flaming skull behind them. The cave was dimly lit with some fat burning in a human skull. Near this light, in a mean and wretched bed, lay an old man of the most horrible aspect. His eyes were as red as blood, his mouth reached from ear to ear, and as for his nose, no words can properly tell its length and its color. So frightful was he that the wizard quaked at the very idea of going near him. "Oh," said the old fellow, "strange news you have to tell me, no doubt, foster daughter. It is long enough since I saw you last. What can I do for you?" The girl told him all about the wizard that had accompanied her and his friends, so to speak, in the Westmann Isles, and how they had dispatched a sending to slay him, and in what way she had treated the same. Upon which the old man waxed quite lively and asked to see the marrow bone that contained the tiny fly of the old sending. And so she immediately took it out of her pocket and gave it to him. And as soon as he saw it, he waxed even livelier than before, and became at last so very brisk that he was really quite another man. Taking the bone in his hand, and with every appearance of pleasure, he turned it about, and patted it, and rubbed it all over. It was very strange indeed. And while he was mumbling over the bone, the girl noticed the islander, the wizard, her man, growing sleepier and sleepier as he had before when the sending approached, and at length said to the old man, "If you will aid me at all, aid me now, for I know full well that the sending is near at hand." And without more ado, therefore, the old fellow took the pork out of the bone, and out crept that strange little fly, whom he petted and stroked, and to whom he said, "Go now, receive
all the settings. From the wizards in the Westmann Isles, and swallow them up.
And immediately, with a loud roar like thunder, the fly flew from the cavern, and when it came to the upper world, behold, it became so large that one jaw reached up to the heavens, and the other touched the earth. And when not only one sending, but 2 or even 3 came, it swallowed them all down. And so the islander was saved from the malice of his companions. After thanking the old man for his timely help, the girl and the Westmann Islander returned to the farm, where, as the story goes, they became man and wife, lived to a good old age, and increased and multiplied. And thus was the land, the Icelandic land, repeopled. As for the other wizards, mighty little more was ever heard about them, just enough indeed to amount to nothing. Now, here's the thing that I particularly like about this story. Besides the fact that it is just structurally very unique among folklore, and well written, frankly, which is more to the adaptation of Jan Jarnesen than anything else. But what I particularly like about it is you can, if you don't know Icelandic folklore, this book, frankly, in particular, by way of a housemaid that, or not a housemaid, a caretaker of sorts for his children, was a massive influence on Tolkien. And it is interesting to read this book because I can really feel it. It's hard for me to nail down where and when precise things that you can see he would have taken for The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings, but it just feels like Lord of the Rings. You can feel the influence of it, more so than all the other Nordic literature that I've read in folklore. This one in particular, I don't know, it just is so... to have mysterious wizards in the distance that send curses and so on the wind. That's so Tolkien. Oh, Janera's here. Happy New Year, Janera. I hope you're doing well. Oh, and we're talking about Greek tales, which, by the way, I know we don't think of it this way, but Greek tales are obviously folklore, and they have influence on a lot of the folklore that we read. So people are noting that there might be similarities here with Greek folklore tales. That's probably not accidental. Jump Store says, Rory, do you have a favorite Greek myth? I guess I don't, which is a boring answer. What I will say is the thing that I particularly gravitated to in Greek mythology was its embrace of chaos in certain pantheons. The most obvious being Dionysus. And I think it's a play by Aristophanes, maybe? Aristophanes... was Aristophanes, but there's a Greek play that I read that is a sort of hyper-realistic version of the celebrations of Dionysus, where women go mad and tear through cows, which is so wild as a concept. Gennaro says, Happy New Year, Rory. Well, thank you very much, Gennaro. Thank you for watching. And we're talking about the old Jason and the Argonauts movie. I'll give you maybe a more satisfactory answer in a moment, Jump Store, but the old Jason and the Argonauts movie is a solid movie, by the way. We do have some translator's notes to get to, but I'm just going to address a bit of the chat. Jump Store says, I have a feeling this woman is going to solve all his problems. I hope he doesn't become the Jason to her Medea. Well, No, she did. She was honest. Honestly, I thought she was going to double cross. I thought she was the Black Death or something when I first read it. Oh, people are talking about Tyler Perry movies. And I think Genera's reflected my my feelings on those sorts of things, which is Perry knows his audience, and the audience just doesn't include me. Yeah, I mean, that's the best way to look at anything. Most things have an audience. No reason to give people a hard time for liking them. But yeah, that's not my thing. But I don't think that's surprising. I'm the guy who's spending an hour reading folklore on the internet. Probably not. But to maybe address it a little more directly, the thing about Greek myth for me is, I guess I didn't quite attract to its soap opera quality, because the thing about Greek myth is they're more powerful than you, and that's why they get to rule. But they are otherwise representative of pretty much all the worst instincts of humanity. They're bad, and I think that our attraction to... Oh man, I'm really getting into the weeds here. I'm going to say this and I'm going to move on. I think our attraction to them is probably very similar to why we attract to things like reality television. Even though we know it's not reality, it's a very similar feel, frankly. Reading old Greek myth, it's like, I could see this as the housewives of Zeus, of Olympia, the real housewives of Olympia. Genera says a very sweet thing. Your streams are the highlight of my work week. Well, you folks are the highlight of my week. Jumpstore says, my favorite is the Hades and Persephone myth, which actually was where my mind first went. And yeah, people give Hades a lot of flack for kidnapping his wife, and people gripe about Demeter being overbearing, but to be fair, Demeter... sorry, it's a problem with how this thing displays. I can't see the rest of the message until another one comes in. I do like myths that explain seasons, and the Persephone myth is that. Her daughter was kidnapped. What mother wouldn't freak out and try to move heaven to find her daughter? Yes. Also, I think it's important to recognize that all the Greek gods did just objectively horrible things. And so if we single out a story and then we judge all the characters in it, we're like ignoring the fact that like the things like Zeus did, Apollo, even though he's supposed to be the golden boy, they're terrible people. And I guess that was something I liked about Dionysus. At least that was a part of his MO. Genera says it was one of the most wholesome relationships in mythology. Also, our conception of Hades became very painted by Christian myth later, because they were sort of recontextualizing it in Christian myth, and he became kind of a devil character, but that's not really how he was conceived of at that time, as far as we can tell. Like, it wasn't delightful, but, you know, you have to die, and where does your soul go, right? He was just tended the sea, the river of souls. That's a Real Housewives show I'd watch. Somebody did a sort of prototype or something version of a kind of high school show with Greek gods on YouTube. That might fill that itch. Anyways, oh, I just realized I don't have my translator's notes uploaded onto this, my card uploaded onto my onto this computer's version of my layout. So we're just going to have to do it without. Okay. So Translator's Notes is where I take comments from older videos, in this case one from 2 weeks ago, I believe, where I've read a translator's works and they want to add some additional context, and so they reply as a comment on my streams. But a lot of people don't go back and watch those, so I take the time here to read them aloud so that people can know. And this one, of course, comes from Jürgen Hubert, who we read a couple of stories from today. And it was on my forgotten which one it was on. It was on one of my Christmas streams. And these words are my own. Normally I put up a card so we know that they're not my words, but I forgot that it's not uploaded on this, so I apologize. Great stories as always, and I hope you'll get your laptop problem sorted out soon. No. Some comments. I did research on the history of Krampus a bit one time, and the oldest textual source I could find was an Ein Akte Beitrag zur Schilderung Wiens. I'm sure that's not how you say it. A genuine contribution to the description of Vienna on Google Books from 1700. So Krampus definitely predated the postcards, although these did do a lot to popularize him, particularly in the English-speaking world in the last few decades. His next point. And speaking of Google Books, it's one of the most important repositories of old folklore books, but hardly the only one. I mainly draw from the Internet Archive, but there was also a number of smaller regional digital libraries published by German and other universities. I've spent hundreds of hours reading through those old books, and I am grateful that these works are now easily available like this. My work would have been much harder just a few decades ago. Carrying on. I've maintained for some time that tabletop role-playing games, and for those who don't know, that's Dungeons and Dragons kind of stuff. There's a lot more than that, but that's probably what you would know. Are one of the genuine successors to old oral folk storytelling traditions. So it pleases me when folktale protagonists have the proper attitude of D&D adventurers: trick, kill, and loot. Mine are RP indecisively for 2 hours. Yeah. Offering princesses hands in marriage is a staple of such tales. I was complaining about how she was just a token. Too often the role of woman in folk stories is to be merely a price of the male protagonist, though it's very pleasing to come across some of the rare exceptions. This type of trope pretty much begs for subversions by modern storytellers, in my opinion, which I have written. I just have not put it out yet. That's my words, that last one. I'm still surprised that there is an almost complete absence of the troll/ogre type of antagonist in the German folktales I've read, and I wonder why this is the case. Genuinely baffling. Spreadsheets for keeping tracks of tales is the way, capitalized, like it's dogma. I'm glad I started my own spreadsheet soon after I published my first book. Now the spreadsheet has 528 entries, and it would be extremely difficult to keep track of everything, social media, sharing, organizing the books, etc. without it. And that one is very squarely focused at me, Rory, because I admitted that I was doing a bad job tracking this. I do want to just add to a couple of things there that Jürgen said. So these are my own words. As far as Krampus, I didn't want to imply that Krampus was invented by postcards. I think I said it. I believe it probably comes before that. But I did want to say that I think Jürgen's comment reflects this. I'm clarifying this for this audience. My point was, I think its significance in German folklore is a little overstated in the English-speaking world because of those cards. I think they expect that there's a lot of tales about it, and there doesn't seem to be. I mean, it's hard to find them anyways. As far as tabletop role-playing games carrying on old oral folk storytelling traditions, I could spend 4 hours talking about this. This is definitely my belief. But what I will say is what really stands out for me, if you'll indulge me for a second, is D&D does not have D&D in particular does not have very restrictive lore. They have characters that repeat from edition to edition. It's in its 5th edition right now, sort of moving into a weird 6th edition. But each of those editions does not carry continuity with each other, if you don't know. They might carry some things over and they might leave some things behind, but it's also assumed that each table is making their own adjustments anyways. And that's a perfect summary of what folklore is. Because what folklore isn't is Tolkien. It isn't Lord of the Rings, where you have a solid definition of things, and this is the genealogy of where things came from and stuff. No. Folklore is a loose grab bag of characters, features, and tropes and themes that you yank stuff out of and make your own stories from. And then when your story's done, it gets broken down into those pieces with your pieces staining it and thrown back into the bag that we call the Creative Commons. And I think tabletop role-playing games are the only ones that are not currently being strangled by copyright. Because you can just play it with your friends or online or whatever else. And for those who've never played any tabletop games or Pathfinder or D&D or anything like that, that takes a lot of influence from Folklore. Pathfinder's a little more restrictive in its lore. You'd be surprised how much of it isn't game and how much of it's just people telling stories like we're doing here. It's not the way it looks and shows anyways. As far as me writing a tale that subverts one of the themes, yeah, it's done. And then I talked to somebody who's publishes a local spec-fic journal, and they were interested in it. So I'm going to see if that pans out first, because, I got to get some money to pay for a new laptop. If that doesn't, I will put it up on my website once I can pay for an editor. But it takes a tale from one of Jürgen's collections that I feel was told from the perspective of a father who failed his daughter, and switches the perspective more from the daughter's side of that tale. And the people that I've handed around, my close writer friends who've read it, really liked it. So I hope if you ever get a chance to see it, that you will also like it. It's not a book, it's a short story. It's like 10,000 words or something. And probably less by the time you see it. Now, I will say, I didn't even put it together, but you're absolutely right, Jürgen, that I don't know of any trolls or ogres occurring in German folklore. That seems so weird. It has so much crossover with a bunch of other Nordic traditions. Yes, they always take their own version of it, but there's a lot of roots in common there. And I just can't even imagine why that one didn't get carried on. There are giants, I guess, right? Maybe that's what they did with it. And as for spreadsheets, I'm going to have to, aren't I? I just hate spreadsheets. I mean, I like them in function. I hate making them. I am an artiste. Okay. We're still talking about the delightful relationship of Hades and Persephone. Genera says, I haven't really gotten to play D&D, but want to. Definitely more of an RP person, overkill, and loot person. Though my little halfling rogue will loot any body they spot. I mean, that's just about finding the right table. Like my table, I DM a couple of tables. That shouldn't be that surprising. I like telling stories. They mostly prefer the RP, to be honest. It's hard for them to get them to even engage with the dungeon because they'll just talk to each other for 2.5 hours. It's not a bad thing, up to a point. Zombie Wolf says, one thing I hate about D&D was the murder hobos. I think there's less of that now, or at least we know better how to sort of self-select our groups. Because murder hobo is a fair way to play D&D. It's just not necessarily what most people do. And we talked a little bit about Percy Jackson books. Jump Store has nothing kind to say about it. I'll say that, like, the Percy Jackson books are doing their own thing, and that's what Myth is for. And obviously it's brought a lot of joy to a lot of people's lives, and if they enjoy that stuff, they can reach out to other, more perhaps complex versions of those myths. Genera says, I love spreadsheets that make them art. You sound like my partner. Okay, well, GS, Genera, Jump Store, Zombie Wolf, Tammy, hope you feel better. pneumonia is no joke. Take care of yourself. And I hope your daughter's doing well, and the pneumonia didn't rob you of a Christmas with him. But for the rest, thank you so much for showing up and listening to Tales About New Year's. I'll be back next week doing I don't know what, but I'll also be back on Thursday if you join for the Varietal Show, if you like to do ride-alongs. I have some stuff in mind, but I don't know which one I'm going to do. We'll see. But join me then if you want to do that. In the meantime, I'll keep the fire warm. You have yourself a good sleep.